The accusation sphere hung in the center of the chamber like a crystal tear frozen in time. Inside it, Marcus Webb stood alone, his gray hair catching the light from 700 species watching his every move. The Galactic Council's judgment hall stretched upward for 3 kilometers, carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight that humanity did not yet understand how to make. Every surface reflected and amplified sound, turning whispers into declarations and lies into thunder. Marcus had been standing there for 2 hours. His legs ached. His throat was dry. But he kept his face calm, his hands relaxed at his sides. Around him, holographic displays showed Earth from space. Human cities, spacecraft designs, cultural records that the Council's experts had spent months analyzing. Every image was chosen to make humanity look small, young, insignificant. High Arbiter Theln rose from his seat at the top of the chamber. His species, the Korthax, had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 8 million years. He had 6 eyes that could see in spectrums humans could barely imagine. And right now, all 6 blazed with something between contempt and anger. Ambassador Webb. Theln's voice rolled through the chamber in 700 languages simultaneously, translated by fields of energy that wrapped around each representative's mind. Humanity has existed for what you claim to be 300,000 years. Yet you stand before this council, demanding voting rights, trade privileges, and military autonomy. These privileges are granted only to ancient races, species that have traveled the stars for 10 million years or more. Marcus said nothing. He had learned in his 40 years of diplomatic service that silence could be more powerful than words. Let them talk. Let them show their hand. Representative Vosh spoke next, a being made of living crystal whose people had built empires before Earth's sun ignited. We have investigated your world thoroughly human. Your species achieved spaceflight 147 years ago. Your first contact with galactic civilization occurred 92 years ago. You are infants playing at politics. Around the chamber, other representatives added their voices. A floating jellyfish, being whose thoughts manifested as colored light, spoke of human arrogance. A collective consciousness of insect-like creatures buzzed about the danger of allowing primitive species into the council. An entity that existed partially in other dimensions simply radiated disappointment. Marcus watched them all. He noted who spoke with genuine anger and who seemed to be performing for others. He saw 3 representatives in the far section who remained silent, their ancient eyes watching him with an expression he recognized: calculation. The evidence is clear, Theln continued, slamming his judgment staff against the floor. The sound created ripples in space itself. Your written history extends back barely 6,000 years. Your oldest buildings are mere thousands of years old. Your technology is copied from Yeltrani templates provided during first contact. You have no ancient ruins, no archaeological evidence of advanced civilization, no artifacts that predate your recent development. The holographic displays changed, showing comparison after comparison. The pale aggregates had cities older than Earth's mountains. The Korthax Dominion had star charts showing trade routes that existed when humans were still living in caves. The Veltrani Confederation had museums filled with technology from races that had risen and fallen twice before humanity learned to make fire. Do you deny these facts? Theln demanded, his 6 eyes focusing on Marcus with laser intensity. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the chamber. I deny nothing. I merely observe that the Council's archaeologists have been selective in what they chose to investigate. The chamber erupted. Shouts of human arrogance filled the space. How dare this representative of a species barely out of its own solar system question the Council's thoroughness? Representatives who had been silent now added their voices to the condemnation. But Marcus noticed that those 3 representatives in the far section still had not joined the outcry. One of them, An elderly being whose species claimed to have witnessed the first stars form gave him the slightest nod. Her name was Eldest Mara, and she was studying him the way a master chess player studies an opponent who has just made an unexpected move. Fell raised his staff again, and silence crashed down like a physical weight. You have 20 cycles to provide evidence of humanity's supposed ancient heritage. Real evidence, artifacts, archaeological sites. Something that proves your species deserves the status you claim. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow still reached every corner of the massive chamber. If you fail, Earth will be classified as a novice species. You will be subject to cultural quarantine. Your expansion will be limited to your own solar system for the next 10,000 years. Your trade will be restricted. Your diplomatic privileges will be revoked. The High Arbiter paused, letting the weight of those words settle. And Ambassador Webb, you personally will face charges of fraudulent representation before this council. A crime punishable by neural restructuring. We will rewrite your mind to remove the deceptions you have spread. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but kept his expression neutral. Neural restructuring was not execution, but it was close. They would take apart his thoughts, remove what they considered lies, and leave behind something that was technically him, but not really him anymore. It was a fate some species considered worse than death. Guards empowered, armor materialized from alcoves Marcus had not seen before. They moved toward the accusation sphere, ready to escort him out. The judgment was over. Humanity had 20 cycles to prove itself, or face isolation for 10 millennia. Marcus had 20 cycles to prove himself, or lose his mind dot as the sphere opened and the guards took position around him. Marcus caught Eldest Mara's eye one more time. She made a gesture so subtle it could have been nothing. A slight movement of one thin arm toward the eastern corridor. Then she turned away, as if dismissing him entirely. But Marcus understood. In the language of galactic diplomacy, that gesture meant something specific. A meeting. A conversation that could not happen in official channels. Information that the council did not want shared openly. The guards led him toward the exit, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. Other representatives were already leaving, discussing humanity's impending humiliation, placing bets on whether Earth would accept the quarantine or try to resist and face military action. Marcus walked with his head high, his steps steady. 20 cycles. 480 hours by Earth's measurement. He had faced worse odds before, though he could not quite remember when as he passed through the eastern corridor that Mara had indicated, he saw a small mark on the wall that had not been there before. A symbol in a language older than most species in the council. It gave coordinates and a time. Marcus memorized it and kept walking. The guards did not notice. They were too busy making sure he did not try to escape, not realizing that Marcus Webb had no intention of running. He had a meeting to attend in the Undercroft, in a place that existed in official records, but that nobody discussed. And he had questions that needed answers before humanity's time ran out. The Undercroft existed in a part of the council station that made normal space feel wrong. Marcus followed the coordinates Mara had given him, walking down corridors that seemed to bend at angles that geometry should not allow. Gravity shifted with each step, pulling him in directions that did not match the floor beneath his feet. Twice he passed doorways that opened into places that could not possibly fit within the station's exterior dimensions. He found Mara waiting in a chamber that appeared to be carved from solidified time itself. The walls shifted between past and future states, showing the room as it was, as it had been, and as it would be, all simultaneously. "You should not be here, human," Mara said, but her tone suggested she had expected him anyway. "This place is reserved for representatives whose species remember the time before." The time before what? Marcus asked, his voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. Mara's face, though completely alien, somehow conveyed profound sadness. Before the current galaxy, before the laws of physics stabilized into their present form, before time moved in only one direction, she moved closer, studying him with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. Tell me, Marcus Webb, what do you truly know about your species' origins? Marcus considered his answer carefully. The official story says we evolved on Earth over millions of years. Natural selection, genetic drift, adaptation to changing environments. And the unofficial story? There are gaps, Marcus admitted. Evolutionary jumps that paleontologists argue about. Genetic markers that suggest outside interference. Ancient human legends about teachers who came from the stars and then vanished without explanation. Archaeological anomalies that get dismissed or buried because they do not fit the accepted time. Line, Mara nodded slowly. The Council knows about these anomalies. Some of us have suspected for years that humanity is not what it appears to be. But suspicion is not proof, and proof is what you need in the next 18 cycles. She began walking deeper into the undercroft, and Marcus followed. The corridor stretched ahead of them, impossibly long, lined with doors that led to places Marcus suspected he did not want to see. In 3 cycles, there will be a mandatory observation at the Vault of First Things, Mara said. It is a museum holding the galaxy's most ancient artifacts, items from before most current species existed. Attendance is required for all species, currently under judgment by the Council. What am I looking for? If I told you, you might think I manipulated your perception. You must see for yourself and draw your own conclusions. She stopped at a doorway that seemed to lead into darkness deeper than simple absence of light. But I will warn you of this. The vault's curator is Archon Drell. He has spent 40,000 years guarding those relics. He is older than some of the artifacts themselves. If you cause trouble, if you touch things you should not touch, not even your species' mysterious nature will protect you from his response. Before Marcus could ask more questions, Mara stepped through the doorway and vanished. He was left alone in the corridor that existed at wrong angles to reality. Marcus made his way back to Earth's embassy through passages that took half the time they should have. His aide, Rita Ortega, was waiting with reports and worried expressions. The situation is deteriorating, Rita said, pulling up intelligence feeds on holographic displays. The hardliners on the Council are pushing for an immediate vote to quarantine Earth. They want to move before your 20 cycles are up. They are afraid, Marcus said, studying the data. Afraid? They think we are children who stumbled into galactic politics without understanding the rules. No, Marcus shook his head, pointing to military deployment patterns on the displays. Look at the actual ship movements, not the official rhetoric. The Korthax have moved 3 battle fleets to the edge of human space. The Pale Aggregates are conducting military exercises near our trade routes. The Veltrani have activated defense stations that have been dormant for centuries. Rita studied the patterns, and her eyes widened. They are not treating us like a novice species. These are the deployments you use against a peer competitor, against a threat. Exactly. They say we are insignificant children, but they position their militaries as if we might suddenly become dangerous. Marcus sat down heavily, the weight of the situation pressing on him. Which means some of them know something they are not saying publicly. Some of them suspect humanity is not what we appear to be. But you do not know what we really are either, Rita pointed out. I have read your file, Marcus. Exemplary diplomatic career, degrees from the best universities, decades of experience. But there is nothing in your history that suggests you know ancient secrets about humanity's origins. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. There are things I cannot quite remember. Moments in my past that feel edited, like someone removed specific memories and covered the gaps. I remember graduating from West Point Military Academy. I remember receiving honors. But when I try to remember specific details, everything goes fuzzy." He looked up at Rita. "Have you ever felt like you are older than you should be? Like your life started before you were born?" Rita's expression changed, just for a moment. A flicker of something like recognition crossed her face before she pushed it away. "Sometimes I have dreams about places I have never been, about knowing things I never learned. But dreams are just dreams." "Maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe they are memories of something we are not supposed to remember yet." Over the next 2 cycles, Marcus prepared for the visit to the Vault of First Things. He researched what little information was publicly available about the museum. Most of it was vague, filled with references to artifacts of incomprehensible age, to items that predated the current universal laws, to mysteries that even the oldest species could not explain. He also noticed something else. Across Earth and human colonies, reports were coming in of strange phenomena. People experiencing vivid dreams of impossible antiquity. Scientists discovering equations they could not explain how they knew. Artists creating works in styles that matched no known human culture, but that felt deeply fundamentally human, somehow. It was as if humanity was beginning to remember something it had forgotten. On the 3rd cycle, as he prepared to depart for the vault, Marcus received a private message through channels so secure they should not have existed. The message was short, unsigned, but the meaning was clear. "The sword will know you. Let it." Marcus deleted the message, but the words stayed with him. "The sword will know you." What sword? How could an artifact in a museum know anything? He would find out soon enough that the Vault of First Things existed partially outside normal spacetime. Marcus felt the transition as his transport approached, a sensation like stepping from solid ground into water without getting wet. His perception shifted in ways that made his eyes hurt. Colors began to taste like sound. Gravity developed texture. He could sense the age of objects around him, like weight pressing against his consciousness. The other council representatives seemed unaffected, which told Marcus this was his problem, not the vault's. Rita touched his arm, steadying him, and the sensation decreased slightly, grounding through human contact. That helped somehow. Archon Drell met them in the entrance hall, a space so large it contained weather systems. The curator was not a biological being, but something else. Energy contained within geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. His voice did not come from any physical source, but resonated directly inside visitors' minds. "You stand in the presence of items that witnessed the galaxy's birth." Drell's voice carried the weight of 40,000 years of guardianship. "Show respect or leave immediately. I have ended the existence of species that showed disrespect to these artifacts." The mandatory observation was designed to remind younger species of their cosmic insignificance. Marcus watched as Drell led the group through chambers filled with impossible objects. The first tool ever created by sentient hands, 8.7 billion years old, still sharp enough to cut reality itself. A star map carved before any current species existed, showing constellations that had long since drifted into new configurations. Fragments of weapons from the precursor wars that had nearly destroyed all life 3 billion years before humanity was even a dream. But it was the primordial collection that made Marcus stop breathing. The chamber was smaller than the others, more intimate, and the artifacts within it were displayed in stasis fields that visibly strained under the weight of containing things that old. Marcus saw a crown that predated matter in its current form. Musical instruments from species that had evolved before sound existed the way it did now. Armor fragments that matched descriptions from human mythology with disturbing precision. And there, mounted on a pedestal of crystallized void energy in the center of the chamber, was a sword. Marcus's hands started shaking before his conscious mind recognized what he was seeing. The placard read in the common galactic language, "Ceremonial Blade, age, 15.2 billion years. Origin, unknown. Predates current universal iteration." The sword was 107 centimeters long. The blade showed an iridescent pattern that shifted between states of matter, never settling on solid or liquid or gas, but cycling through all three in states in between. The hilt was wrapped in material that appeared synthetic, but could not be synthetic because synthetic materials were invented billions of years after this. Sword was supposedly forged. Marcus knew every detail because he had held this exact sword 33 years ago. West Point Military Academy, Earth, the ceremony honoring graduates who had achieved distinction in xenological studies. Marcus had been 21 years old, eager to join Earth's new diplomatic corps, ready to represent humanity among the stars. The dean had presented him with a ceremonial blade as recognition of his achievements. An antique from a private collection, Marcus had been told. He had displayed the sword in his quarters for years. He had carried it to his first diplomatic posting. He had cleaned it and maintained it and felt a connection to it that he could not explain. And then what? Marcus tried to remember what happened to the sword after that first posting, but his memory fractured like broken glass. There were pieces missing. Gaps where something important should be, but was not. The sword had simply disappeared from his life, and he had apparently never questioned why or how. Ambassador Webb? Rita whispered beside him. "You look like you have seen a ghost." Marcus could not respond. He was staring at other items in the primordial collection now, and recognition kept hitting him in waves. A navigation device that he swore he had seen in his grandmother's attic when he was 8 years old. A data storage crystal identical to ones used in Earth's earliest quantum computers. A piece of armor that matched designs from human legends about Achilles, about Beowulf, about warriors who supposedly never existed outside. E of Stories. The primordial collection represents our greatest mystery. Archon Drell explained to the assembled representatives, his geometric form pulsing with each word. These items exist outside standard causality. They appear older than they should be by several billion years. They contain materials that should not exist in their current form. Atomic structures that predate the formation of those atoms. He gestured at the sword. This blade, for example, contains elements that were not created until the first supernovas occurred. Yet it supposedly predates those supernovas by 4 billion years. Some theorists believe these items are echoes from previous universal cycles. Others think they are sophisticated forgeries. But all tests confirm their impossible age. Or, a new voice interrupted, and everyone turned to see Representative Vosh speaking, his crystal structure pulsing with unusual agitation. They are evidence of something the Council does not want to acknowledge. The chamber went very quiet. Vosh was one of the hardliners who had attacked humanity most viciously during the Judgment. Hearing him speak in defense of anything related to Earth was unexpected. Some of us, Vosh continued, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep unease, have noticed correlations that the Council refuses to investigate properly. Items in this collection match descriptions from human mythology with alarming frequency. The Council dismisses this as coincidence. Young species often create myths about ancient artifacts, they say. But what if the pattern is real? What if the young species remembers something the old species forgot? The chamber erupted in argument. Representatives who had been allies suddenly turned on each other. Scientists demanded more investigation. Politicians shouted about maintaining order. Military officials calculated threat levels, but Marcus barely heard any of it. He was staring at the sword, and a memory was surfacing. Not from 30 years ago. From much, much longer. He remembered forging that blade. Not on Earth. Not in human history. as it was currently understood, but in a time that came before. A time when physics were suggestions rather than laws. When time was a direction you could choose rather than a current carrying you forward. He remembered ending a war, sealing something away, making a choice that would echo forward through reality itself, rippling through causality like a stone thrown into still water. And he remembered the price of that choice. Forgetting. Humanity scattered across time like seeds. Their memories locked away, living small mortal lives until the moment they needed to remember who they really were. "That is my sword," Marcus said quietly. The entire vault went silent. 700 species stopped arguing. Archon Drell's geometric form froze mid-pulse. High Arbiter Theln appeared via holographic projection, his 6 eyes blazing. "What did you just say, human?" Marcus looked up from the sword, and when he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that should not come from a human throat. "I said that is my sword. I forged it 15 billion years ago to seal the breach points during the First War. And if it is here, in your vault, then the seals are failing, and the Devourers are coming back." Chaos erupted instantly. Archon Drell moved with impossible speed for something so ancient, creating an isolation field around Marcus that cut him off from the rest of the chamber. Security forces materialized from folded space, their weapons trained on the human who had just claimed ownership of an artifact older than the galaxy itself. High Arbiter Theln's holographic projection grew larger, more solid, his 6 eyes blazing with fury and something that might have been fear. "Explain yourself, human." Theln's voice shook the vault's foundations. "You dare claim ownership of a relic that predates your species by billions of years?" But Marcus was not looking at the High Arbiter or the weapons or the security forces. He was staring at his own hands, watching them flicker. Present, not present, present again. Existing and not existing simultaneously, as if he was phasing between different states of reality. Memories cascaded through him like a dam breaking. Each one was impossible. Each one felt undeniably true. He remembered being older than stars. He remembered when consciousness first emerged from quantum foam, when the first thoughts echoed through probability space and made the universe aware of itself. He remembered the first war, not the precursor wars that galactic history recorded, but the real first war fought across probability itself. The Devourers had tried to prevent reality from stabilizing. They wanted to keep the universe in its quantum state, eternally possible but never actual, because in that state they could feed on infinite potential forever. The architects, the beings that would eventually choose to become humanity, had fought to make reality real, to collapse probability into actuality, to create a universe where things could exist definitely rather than just possibly. "The sword," Marcus said, and his voice sounded strange even to himself, layered with harmonics from other dimensional frequencies, was forged from the heart of a collapsed possibility. We took a timeline that could have existed and compressed it down to a single edge, a blade that cuts through probability itself. He looked up at Theln. The war was ending. We had pushed the Devourers back beyond the edge of causality. But we needed to seal the breach points, the places where reality was thin enough for them to push through. So we made weapons that existed in all times simultaneously. Past, present, and future, all at once. "This is insanity," Theln hissed, but several council members had gone very quiet. Eldest Mara among them, her ancient face unreadable. Rita pushed through the security forces, ignoring their weapons, and grabbed Marcus's flickering hand. The contact helped. He solidified, became fully present again. "Marcus, if what you are saying is true, why now? Why are you remembering this now?" The answer came not from Marcus, but from Archon Drell. The curator's geometric form shifted, revealing something beneath, something vast and old that had been hiding inside the smaller container. Because the Devourers are returning. We have detected temporal anomalies in 14 sectors over the past month. Causality breaking down. Events happening before their causes. Effects with no origins. The seals are failing. He turned to face the assembled council. And for the first time in 40,000 years of service, his voice carried emotion, fear. I have guarded this vault for longer than most of your species have existed. But these artifacts were here before me. My predecessor guarded them. Her predecessor guarded them. The chain goes back 200 generations of curators. But no one remembers who created the vault or why these specific items were preserved. Drell's form pulsed with realization. Until now, the vault was not created to store ancient artifacts. It was created to store activation keys, items that would trigger memories in the species that placed them here. The architects left themselves a way to remember when the time was right. Eldest Mara stepped forward, her movements slow but deliberate. My species claims to remember the first stars igniting. We have legends of the ones who came before us, the beings we call the architects, the ones who made the universe stable enough for species like us to evolve. We always assumed these were myths, stories told to give meaning to existence. Not myths, Marcus said. Survivors. My species, humanity, we were not the only architects. There were others. The Corfax, the Pale Aggregates, the Veltrani. All of you descend from species that worked alongside us. But we were the ones who chose to forget completely. We needed to be outside the timeline to do what comes next. And what comes next? Vosh asked, his crystal structure vibrating with fear and awe combined. Marcus reached through the isolation field. It should have been impossible, but the field recognized something in his genetic structure and parted. He grasped the sword's hilt, and the moment his skin touched the ancient metal, everything changed. The blade transformed. The iridescent pattern reorganized, responding to markers in his DNA that should not exist in a species that supposedly evolved naturally. Energy cascaded across the sword, not power from this universe, but from the probability space between quantum states. Every screen in the vault activated simultaneously, showing the same terrifying image. Temporal tiers opening across the galaxy like wounds in reality. And through those tiers, things were crawling. Entities that existed at angles to normal space. Beings that fed on causality itself, that consumed the possibility of existence and left behind only never was. The Devourers, Marcus said quietly, and the name carried weight that made several representatives cry out in instinctive terror. They found a way back. The seals held for 15 billion years, but they have been patient. They have been pressing against reality this entire time, looking for weaknesses. And now the seals are breaking because too many humans have died without remembering who they were. We need enough of us to wake up, to become what we were, or reality itself will unravel. He looked at the assembled council, and his eyes showed depths that had not been there before. You wanted proof that humanity is ancient? Here it is. We are not from this galaxy. We are not from this iteration of the universe. We are the ones who made sure there could be at this time. We collapsed probability into actuality. We made reality real. Feln's holographic form flickered with emotion he could not control. If what you essay. Why is true, if you are what you claim, then Earth is not an honest species. It is ... The failsafe, Archon Drell finished. The emergency protocol the architects left behind. A species scattered through time, living small mortal lives, positioned perfectly in the timeline to activate when the threat returned. Hidden even from themselves until the moment they were needed. Rita stared at Marcus, seeing him truly for the first time. How many? How many humans need to wake up to stop this? Not all of us, Marcus said, studying the temporal tiers on the screens. Never all of us. The majority of humanity needs to remain mortal, remain anchored in normal time. That is the key to the strategy. But enough need to remember. A few thousand scattered across Earth and the colonies. Enough to form a network. Enough to reconstitute the seals. And if you fail? Vosh asked. Marcus met his crystalline gaze. Then the Devourers will not just destroy this galaxy. They will unmake it. They will make it so it never was. Every species, every world, every thought and dream and achievement erased from causality itself. Your histories will not have happened. Your ancestors will never have existed. You will be less than dead. You will be never born. The vault shuddered. Alarms screamed through the station. On the screens, the temporal tiers were spreading faster. Things were pressing through, hungry and patient and vast. High Arbiter Thelm made a decision. Emergency powers are invoked. Ambassador Webb, humanity is hereby granted ancient status immediately. Full council authority is transferred to human command for the duration of this crisis. All resources, all ships, all knowledge are now at your disposal. He paused. Save us. Save all of us. Marcus hefted the sword, feeling its weight, feeling the memories of forging it flood back. I need to return to Earth immediately. There is an awakening protocol buried in our cultural DNA. Stories, myths, legends, they are all activation codes. We just need to know how to read them correctly. How long? Mara asked, her voice quiet. Marcus watched another tear open on the screens. Watched something vast and terrible press against the wound in reality. Days, maybe less. The Devourers have been preparing for this moment since we sealed them away. They have been patient for 15 billion years. He smiled, and it was not entirely a human expression anymore. But so have we. Earth's orbital defense network lit up as temporal anomalies appeared throughout the solar system. The moon developed a shadow that pointed in a direction that did not exist in three-dimensional space. Mars's two moons began orbiting backward through time, arriving at positions before they departed. Jupiter's great red spot developed eyes that watched the inner planets with ancient hunger. Marcus returned to Earth not as a disgraced diplomat, but as something humanity was only beginning to understand. Rita came with him, along with a small council delegation led by Mara and Drell. But when their transport touched down in Geneva, they found the streets already filled with people, not panicking, waiting, like they had been expecting this moment their entire lives without consciously knowing it. Secretary General Rebecca Ashford met them at the landing pad. Marcus had known her for 15 years, had worked with her on dozens of diplomatic initiatives. But now, looking at her, he saw the flicker of recognition that came before full awakening. She was beginning to remember, too. How many have already begun? Marcus asked. Thousands reporting strange memories worldwide. Hundreds have fully awakened. We have moved them to special facilities. Rebecca led them inside the United Nations building. They all say the same thing, Marcus. They remember being old. They remember making a choice. And they are all hearing a signal, a frequency that exists outside normal physics. Marcus nodded. The activation protocol. It is running automatically now that enough seals have broken. But we need to accelerate it. We need more awakened, and we need them fast. Over the next 72 hours, Earth transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Marcus stood in a command center that had not existed 3 days earlier, coordinating with awakened humans across the planet. A farmer in rural India who suddenly remembered forging the first star. A teacher in Brazil who recalled negotiating with entities made of pure mathematics. A child in New Beijing who spoke in languages that predated language itself, translating them into equations that advanced human physics by centuries. Not everyone awakened. That was crucial. The strategy required balance. Too many awakened, and humanity would lose its anchor to the present, become untethered from normal reality. Too few, and they would lack the power needed to reconstitute the seals. Marcus worked with thousands of awakened coordinators, but billions of humans remained mortal, unaware of the larger truth. Those unawakened billions served as the anchor, keeping the awakened connected to current reality, preventing them from drifting back into the timeless existence they had left behind. The Devourers pressed harder. 3 colony worlds in the outer systems simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, but unmade, written out of causality so completely that no one remembered they had ever been there except the awakened, who existed partially outside normal causality themselves. The Galactic Council watched in growing horror as species with 10-million-year histories began flickering in and out of existence. The pale aggregates lost entire star systems to temporal decay. The Quarthax found their historical records changing, showing different pasts than the ones they remembered. On the 4th day, Marcus stood atop Mont Blanc. The location was chosen carefully. It was where humanity had first looked up at the stars with primitive telescopes and dreamed of reaching them, where the journey that would eventually lead to this moment had begun. Around him stood 12,000 awakened humans. Each one blazed with power that predated physics as currently understood. Each one remembered their true age, their true purpose. The sword, his sword, was embedded point first in stone before him, not as a weapon now, but as a focus. A bridge between what humanity had been and what they had chosen to become. "We are not going back," Marcus told the assembled awakened. His words broadcast across all human space through quantum channels that ignored distance and time. "We are not returning to what we were. That time is past. We made our choice 15 billion years ago. Mortality, growth, forgetting. We chose these limitations because we understood something fundamental. Power without limitation becomes stagnation. We needed to be small to remember what it meant to be great." He placed his hands on the sword's hilt. Around him, 12,000 humans did the same, not physically, but through quantum entanglement that made distance meaningless. The seals we are about to create will not last forever. They are not meant to. They will hold for a few million years, maybe more. Long enough for this galaxy to grow and change. Long enough for species to rise and fall. Long enough for new life to flourish and create new wonders. Marcus smiled, and it was both ancient and young simultaneously. Because that is the real secret. We are not special. We are just early. And we are making sure there is a universe here long enough for others to take their turn. The power built slowly at first, then faster. 12,000 humans channeled energy from probability space, from the quantum foam where reality was still negotiable. The sword blazed with light that had colors unnamed, that existed in frequencies outside any known spectrum. Across the galaxy, the temporal tiers began to close. The Devourers screamed, a sound that existed in the part of consciousness where nightmares were born, where terror lived before it had words. They pressed against the closing seals with desperate hunger, trying to force their way through before the moment passed, but humanity held firm. Awakened and unawakened together, anchored and vast simultaneously, they wove reality back together. They sealed the breaches with their will and their power and their choice to be mortal in a universe that needed limits. When it was done, Marcus collapsed. The sword returned to its dormant state, looking once again like nothing more than an impossibly ancient artifact. Around him, 12,000 humans slowly came back to themselves, still awakened, but no longer channeling power that could remake worlds. 3 months later, Marcus stood before the Galactic Council again. But everything had changed. Humanity now had 300 representatives, a mix of awakened and unawakened. Because both states were equally important. High Arbiter Thelm began the session with words that had never been spoken before in the Council's long history. We owe humanity an apology and our gratitude. You saved not just our lives, but our very possibility of having existed at all. Marcus shook his head. We did what we positioned ourselves to do billions of years ago, what we scattered ourselves through time to accomplish. But it is important to understand this. We are not superior to you. We are not going to rule the galaxy or claim authority. Why not? Vosh asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. You have the power. You have the knowledge. Because we already made that mistake once, Marcus said quietly. Before we became human, before we chose mortality, the architects tried to maintain order through power alone. We tried to shape the universe according to our vision, and we nearly destroyed everything in the process. He looked around the chamber at 700 species. The Devourers were not invaders from outside reality. They were us. They were what we became when we forgot that consciousness needs limits, when we forgot that power needs purpose beyond self-perpetuation. They were the architects who refused to give up control, who wanted to keep reality in quantum flux forever so they could remain godlike forever. Marcus's words hung in the air like physical weights. We chose mortality to remember what mortality meant. We chose to be small to remember why size does not matter. We scattered ourselves across time, living brief lives, suffering and loving and dying, because that is what the universe needs. Not gods, but participants. Not architects, but gardeners. Eldest Mara rose slowly. What happens now? You are awakened. You remember. Will you return to what you were? Some of us will remain awakened, Marcus explained. We will live longer than normal humans, retain these memories, serve as guides and protections. But we will still age, still die eventually, and the vast majority of humanity will continue living mortal lives. That is our anchor. That is our gift to the universe. We chose to be part of it rather than apart from it. The sword was returned to the vault of first things. But now its placard read differently, telling a truth that had been hidden for 15 billion years. The blade that was both impossibly ancient and relatively young. A graduation gift and a weapon that sealed reality itself. Marcus visited it sometimes. This artifact that contained his past and his future and his choice to be present in between. He had made peace with the contradiction, with being both a mortal human and an architect who shaped universes. Rita found him there one day. She had chosen to remain unawakened to keep her mortal perspective. Do you regret it? Being small for so long? Marcus considered the question. No. Those years as a regular human, growing up, learning, struggling with ordinary problems, falling in love, losing people, all of it was real. It mattered. Maybe it mattered most of all. He turned to face her. The universe does not need more gods. It needs more people willing to show up, do the work, and then step aside so others can take their turn. That is what humanity represents now. Not power, but perspective. Not dominion, but participation. Outside the vault, the galaxy continued its ancient rotation. Species rose and fell. Empires bloomed and faded. And somewhere on Earth, children were being born who carried within them sleeping memories of being vast and old. Memories that might awaken in another billion years or never, depending on what the universe needed. The sword remained in its place. Simultaneously, 15 billion years old and 33 years old. Proof that humanity's greatest power had never been in remembering who they were, but in choosing who they wanted to become. A species that learned to be small so they could remember what it meant to be great. Ancient beings who chose mortality to save reality itself. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.